As the anime begins, we are introduced to Ragnar the Blood Edge, a young man who finds himself face to face with Nu 13, an artificial human guarding the entrance to a mysterious location. Ragnar knows that Nu 13 means to kill him, and so he is forced to fight for his life. The two engage in a fierce battle, with Nu 13 activating her power, and Ragnar doing his best to fend her off. Eventually, Nu 13 manages to stab Ragnar, but rather than finish him off, she embraces him and throws herself down with him. Meanwhile, a mysterious man watches the fight from a distance, taking in the action. A few days later, Ragnar finds himself wandering the streets when he comes across Rachel Alucard. Without hesitation, he attacks her, though she easily dodges his blows. Rachel asks him to come with her to Kagutsuchi City, and despite his initial reluctance, Ragnar finds himself unable to resist her request. The anime follows Ragnar as he journeys to Kagutsuchi and encounters various other characters, each with their own unique abilities and motivations. As the scene moves, we see Noelle Vermillion, a soldier, standing before her boss, Major Jean Kisaragi. She hands him a letter sealed with magic, and after reading it, Jean learns that Ragnar the Blood Edge is currently in Kagutsuchi City. Rather than react with concern or alarm, Jean simply laughs and walks out of the room, leaving Noelle behind. As Jean departs, Ragnar is shown walking the streets of Kagutsuchi, seemingly unfazed by the many flyers featuring his face, which label him as a wanted fugitive. He eventually finds himself in a narrow alley, where he stumbles upon Takaka, a cat-like person, who is dozing in the middle of the road. To Ragnar's surprise, Takaka attacks him, though he chooses to dodge rather than fight back. After the altercation, it becomes clear that Takaka was not trying to harm Ragnar, but rather was seeking his help. She explains that she is hungry, and Ragnar takes pity on her, leading her to a ramen shop. At the shop, Takaka eagerly devours the food that Ragnar provides for her, thanking him and calling him a good guy. In between bites, she mentions that there is a highly wanted fugitive in the city, and that the person who captures them will be rewarded with a large sum of money. Ragnar listens attentively, perhaps considering the potential reward for himself. Upon learning that he is the wanted fugitive Takaka was referring to, Ragnar realizes that he must leave the ramen shop and continue on his journey. As he walks, he suddenly feels a sharp pain in his body. He is reminded of the words of his master, Jubei, who had explained to him that if the power of the Azure Grimoire within him was not fully his own, he would experience pain as a result. Ragnar grimaces, knowing that the agony he is feeling is a warning of sorts, reminding him of the dangers of wielding such powerful magic. In the corner of the city, Noelle greets Captain Hazama, who has just arrived in Kagutsuchi in search of something. As they walk through the town, Hazama inquires about the past attack on the city. Noelle explains that various organizations, including the Shinigami, had attacked Kagutsuchi, but Ragnar had managed to prevent the attack from succeeding. As Noelle speaks, Ragnar, still suffering from the pain in his body, decides to rest and sleep for a while. In his sleep, he is plagued by memories of a past massacre that claimed the life of his younger brother. When he awakens, he finds Noelle by his side, looking concerned. She tries to help him, sensing that he is not feeling well. Despite Noelle's attempts to help him, Ragnar refuses and leaves. As he wanders the streets, he comes across his younger brother, Jean, who has been waiting for him. Jean approaches Ragnar, expressing surprise at seeing his older brother alive after the terrible incident in their past. Emotions running high, Ragnar decides to fight Jean, and the two engage in a fierce battle. At first, Jean seems confident that he will emerge victorious, but Ragnar summons all of the strength within him and manages to knock Jean down. Having won the fight, Ragnar decides to leave the area and continue on his journey. Moments later, Noelle and Hazama come across Jean, who is lying on the ground, helpless. Noelle asks Hazama to look after Jean while she goes in search of Ragnar, but Hazama seems disinterested in helping Jean and leaves the area. Noelle is left alone with Jean, unsure of how to proceed. As Ragnar delves deeper into the dungeon, he encounters an artificial human named Hakumen, who attacks him. Hakumen prepares to unleash his ultimate power, but before he can do so, a magic circle controlled by Kokonoi Mercury appears and ensnares him. Ragnar struggles to break free and continue fighting, but the magic circle proves to be too strong. Realizing that Ragnar is in danger, Kokonoi tries to save him by advising him to leave while the magic circle she created is still able to withstand Hakumen's extreme power. Ragnar listens to her advice and makes a hasty retreat. Ragnar, annoyed at Kokonoi's interference, tells her not to get involved in his battle. Just as he speaks, Hakumen breaks free of the magic circle and Ragnar activates his BlazBlue power to face him. Meanwhile, Noelle, who is searching for Ragnar, finds herself at a location guarded by Nu 13. Unfortunately, Nu 13 mistakes Noelle for an intruder and attacks her in combat mode. Noelle fights back, managing to injure Nu 13 before finally defeating her. Sadly, the attack leaves Noelle badly injured. Just as she is about to be overpowered, Ragna arrives to save her. Nu 13 seems particularly interested in Ragna, who is amazed by her ability to always revive, no matter how many times he has destroyed her. The two engage in a fierce battle, with Hazama watching from a distance. During the fight, Ragna is distracted by memories of a girl he knew in the past, causing him to lose focus. Nu 13 takes advantage of this and hugs him, attacking him at the same time. Ragna fights back, and both are left injured. Nu 13 declares that they will be together forever, but Rachel, who has been watching the fight, comments that their battles always end the same way and will continue to be repeated indefinitely. Just as in their previous fights, Nu 13 embraces Ragna and begins to bring him down with her. Ragna seems to be under some sort of hypnosis, following Nu 13 and recalling memories of a girl named Saya. Ragna sat under the tree with Saya, chatting about their struggles. Suddenly, Saya spoke up and encouraged Ragna not to give up, no matter how many times he stumbled or fell. Her words hit Ragna hard, and he realized that he couldn't let his past failures hold him back any longer. Just as Ragna was lost in thought, he saw Noelle running towards him, a look of determination on her face. She was determined to save him, no matter what. Ragna watched as Noelle closed the distance between them, feeling a sense of hope wash over him. Rachel, who had been watching the fight unfold, was shocked by the turn of events. Meanwhile, Hazama was overjoyed, as this was exactly what he had been waiting for. Noelle, realizing that Ragna was badly injured, rushed off to find medicine. Rachel arrived soon after, revealing to Ragna that he was the original successor to Azure's power. She then left to make room for Noelle, who had returned with the medicine in hand. Ragna was grateful for their help, and vowed to keep fighting until he could overcome his past and achieve victory. As he lay there, battered and bruised, Ragna couldn't help but notice the similarities between Noelle and Saya. Both were strong, determined women who were willing to do whatever it took to help those they cared about. While Ragna was lost in thought, Rachel flew high above Kagutsuchi, creating a dome to protect the city from incoming enemy attacks. Her quick thinking saved countless lives. Just as it seemed that the city was safe, a mysterious machine appeared in outer space and fired a shot towards Kagutsuchi. Rachel's dome managed to deflect the attack, saving the city from destruction. The machine then disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind more questions than answers. As Noelle tended to Ragna's wounds, Hazama appeared, laughing with glee. Ragna, infuriated by Hazama's insensitivity, prepared to attack him. However, Hazama seemed to be enjoying Ragna's anger, especially when he revealed a shocking confession about Ragna's father and a past massacre. Rachel arrived on the scene, urging Ragna not to attack Hazama as his strength was no match for Hazama's. But Ragna was too consumed by rage to listen, and continued to attack Hazama despite the odds against him. Eventually, Hazama grew bored of the fight and left, leaving Ragna panting and frustrated. Rachel, worried about Ragna and Noelle's safety, led them to a safer location. Meanwhile, Kokonoi contacted Rachel with disturbing news. She planned to erase the existence of someone who had just been resurrected. Rachel, however, forbade Kokonoi from going through with it, as she had not received any orders from her superiors to do so. Before Rachel left, she urged Ragna and Noelle to rest and heal themselves, as they would be needed to help her face the major changes that were about to rock their world. As Rachel left the room, Noelle couldn't help but wonder about the strange dynamic between Ragna and Hazama. Despite having just met him, she felt as though she had a deep connection to Ragna, and even experienced flashbacks to moments from their shared past. But when she asked Ragna about it, he seemed distant and uninterested, brushing her off with a curt reply that he didn't know anything about it. It was clear that he wanted her to leave and tend to his own business, leaving Noelle feeling confused and hurt. After Noelle left, Ragna's sharp senses picked up on the presence of two hidden figures. Without hesitation, he called out for them to reveal themselves. As he suspected, Carl Clover and his puppet, Nirvana, emerged from their hiding place. They were members of the Nox organization, and they had come to attack Ragna and steal his Azure power. Despite the surprise attack, Ragna was able to turn the tables on Carl and Nirvana. He fought fiercely, using all of his strength to withstand their powerful attacks. In the end, he emerged victorious, destroying the building and forcing Carl and Nirvana to flee. It was a moment of triumph for Ragna, but he knew that this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. As the rubble from the destroyed building rained down upon him, Ragna lost consciousness and fell into a deep sleep. In his dreams, he was transported back to a dark and troubled time in his past. He saw his childhood home engulfed in flames, and as he approached, he was confronted by Jean and Saya. They blamed him for the disaster, and accused him of being responsible. The confrontation turned violent, and Jean swung his sword at Ragna with deadly intent. But before the blade could connect, Ragna's arm was severed by an unseen attacker. As he lay on the ground, bleeding and in agony, a shadowy figure emerged from the smoke. It was Hazama, who revealed himself as the evil mastermind known as Yuki Terumi. He mocked Ragna's suffering and then made off with Saya, leaving Ragna to struggle on alone. As Jean swung his sword back to attack Ragna, who lay on the ground in pain, Ragna finally stirred from his stupor. When he woke up, he found himself in a house in Lost Town, surrounded by cat-like creatures called Nyasu. Nearby, Takaka and a woman named Lichi Feiling were chatting. Lichi, a doctor from Orient Village, had been treating Ragna for his injuries, which she discovered had been inflicted by members of the Nox organization. As soon as she learned that Ragna had awoken, she ordered Takaka and the Nyasu to leave the room so that she could continue his treatment. The scene returns to the past. Noelle first met Jean at the military academy, where they were both studying. One day, while she was in a park, a gust of wind blew away her poetry paper, which was picked up by Jean, who was nearby. Initially friendly, Jin's demeanor turned cold when he saw Noelle, who bore a striking resemblance to his younger sister, Saya. At present, Hakumen, who had been captured by the 7th Sector headquarters, was bound with an extremely powerful spell as punishment for disobeying Kokonoe's orders. Meanwhile, Rachel was in a meeting with a representative from the Takamagahara system to discuss her use of the Tsukuyomi unit, although she refused to provide any explanations. During the meeting, Rachel learned that Takamagahara had released Yuki Terumi for various reasons. Before she left, Takamagahara asked her to rejoin the system, but Rachel firmly declined the offer. In Lost Town, Takaka brought food for Ragna, who hesitated to eat it due to its unusual appearance, but was pleasantly surprised by its delicious taste. Meanwhile, Noelle met with her classmate Makoto Nanaya at the military academy, where they reminisced about their time together with Tsubaki at school. Makoto informed Noelle that Tsubaki would be arriving in Kagutsuchi, which made Noelle happy as she had not seen her friend in a long time. She also told Noelle that Jean, who had been hospitalized after his fight with Ragna, had reportedly run away, and she suspected that Jean was trying to pursue Ragna. On the other hand, Hazama summoned a woman named Tsubaki Yayoi and ordered her to find and kill Ragna and Noelle. Before departing for Kagutsuchi, Tsubaki entered a room where a weapon known as the Ars Armagus was kept. Afterwards, she called Izayoi. In order to break Izayoi's seal, Tsubaki scraped her hand and placed it over the seal, causing her to experience flashbacks of her past with Jean. As Jean searched for Ragna on the outskirts of Kagutsuchi City, he encountered Jubei, who claimed to be one of the 6 heroes. Despite Jin's distrust, Jubei gave him several warnings before departing. Meanwhile, Noelle used a magic formula to locate Ragna after Makoto left. This magic allowed her to determine that Ragna was in Lost Town, and she set off to find him. On the way, Lichi prepared to fight Noelle, assuming that she was trying to capture Ragna. However, Noelle quickly explained that she only wanted to talk to Ragna, as he had saved her life, and was not interested in capturing him. Upon hearing Noelle's intentions, Lichi agreed to escort her to Ragna's location. Once there, Noelle began tending to Ragna's wounds and bandaging them, while also asking about his relationship with Jean. However, Ragna refused to divulge any information. At a base, a man named Relius Clover arrived in Kagutsuchi and confronted Hazama. Hazama seemed pleased that all the necessary parties were gathered in Kagutsuchi, as it would allow him to carry out his plan smoothly. Meanwhile, Tsubaki searched for the whereabouts of Jean and Noelle. At the same time, Jean continued to search for Ragna, determined to kill him. The following day, Rachel arrived at her castle and told her butler, Valkenhain, that the world was in danger, especially if Hazama continued to interfere, as the situation would become even more complicated. Meanwhile, at the 7th Sector headquarters, Kokonoe contacted Iron Tiger and ordered him to arrest Noelle, who was the heir to Azure and had been targeted by Hazama and Relius. Kokonoe reminded Tiger that there was no need to confront Ragna, as he was very powerful. Tiger, accompanied by his plane, set off for Kagutsuchi upon receiving the order. Noelle was eating with Lichi and Takaka, and she asked if there was any medicine that could help Ragna recover more quickly. Takaka suggested using Nyasa's secret medicine, but Lichi rejected the idea. Shortly thereafter, Rachel arrived and transported them all, including Ragna, to a hot spring, much to their delight. However, Noelle accidentally pressed a button that caused the source of the spring to divert, causing everyone to be thrown to different locations. Noelle and Ragna, who landed in a forest, were then confronted by dark energy as they searched for a way out. Noelle used her weapon to destroy the dark energy. As she did so, Ragna saw a strong resemblance to his younger sister, Saya, and asked her to stay away from him. As Noelle and Ragna parted ways, Ragna remembered his past when he was abandoned by his family and left with a severed hand. In a critical condition, Rachel came to save Ragna and gave him a magic hand, which earned him the title of the Blood Edge. After leaving the forest, Ragna wandered through a market and accidentally met a young girl who begged him for food. Initially resistant, he eventually brought the girl, who introduced herself as Senna, to a restaurant. Ragna realized that Senna had multiple souls, and soon after, one of them, Luna, took over the body. Luna, who had a rude demeanor, fainted, and a spirit named Trinity Glassfield, one of the spirits of the 6 heroes, introduced herself to Ragna. Trinity Glassfield explained that the body, known as Platinum the Trinity, contained multiple souls, and that after the spirit returned to the bodies of Senna and Luna, they had no memory of the past. As Ragna left the restaurant, he was watched by Tager, who reported the surveillance to Kokonoi. At the headquarters, Kokonoi unveiled Lambda 11, a newly created artificial human, for testing. Using a portal, Kokonoi summoned Lambda, who attacked Ragna. Upon seeing Lambda, Ragna thought the artificial human attacking him was Nu 13 due to their similarities. Ragna struggled to defend against Lambda's attack, as he was bound by a magic circle. Despite his strength, he was unable to break free from the circle and attack Lambda, and his sword was unable to damage Lambda's powerful body. Lambda analyzed Ragna's strength and counterattacked, sending him flying backwards. As he did so, Ragna called Lambda by the name Nu 13, causing Lambda to experience Nu 13's memories. Kokonoi then asked Tager to take Lambda for repair. Meanwhile, Jean, still searching for Ragna, encountered a fruit seller in an attempt to gather information about him. Sometime later, Jean encountered Bang Shishigami in a narrow alley and engaged in a fight. To Jin's surprise, he was easily defeated by Shishigami with a single punch, and Shishigami decided to take Jean back to his house. At night, Noelle passed by Lichi's clinic and saw Lichi leaving. Out of curiosity, she asked Lichi's assistant, Lin Hua, about it. She learned that Lichi had been asked by Shishigami to treat Jean, who was in pain. This news puzzled Noelle. Shishigami later explained that he did not want to fight Jean, who was sick. The following day, Tsubaki went to the fruit seller that Jean had previously encountered and easily obtained the information she sought after paying the merchant. Meanwhile, Shishigami invited Jean to take a walk to get some fresh air, and they went their separate ways. After Shishigami left, Tsubaki approached Jean and created a dark room that immobilized him. Jean realized that Tsubaki had been controlled to kill him, and attempted to snap her out of it, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Tsubaki continued to attack him until he was seriously injured. Upon realizing what she had done, Tsubaki broke down in tears. Takamagahara, not wanting Jean to die, caused time to repeat itself and made Jean go with Shishigami to avoid Tsubaki. At night, Jean left the house as his strength had returned. Meanwhile, Tsubaki, who did not meet Jean, encountered Noelle instead. Meanwhile, Makoto, who was investigating something, was shocked when she saw a light appear in front of her. Upon hearing a sound emitted by the light, she realized that Noelle had sent her a message saying that she had found Jean and intended to talk to him. Noelle, who was meeting with Tsubaki, already knew that Tsubaki had been sent by someone to capture her. Upon hearing this, Tsubaki confirmed it, and reluctantly admitted that she had to fulfill the order no matter what. Shortly after, she created a dark room to attack Noelle. Meanwhile, Rachel met with Ragna and invited him to a location where Relius was holding a fight between Noelle and Tsubaki. Relius explained that Noelle was one of his artificial human creations, and he wanted to see her strength in action against Tsubaki. In the battle arena, Noelle was able to move her body to counter and blocked Tsubaki's attack within the dark room. However, when she hesitated to shoot Tsubaki, Tsubaki took the opportunity to attack and knock her down. Suddenly, Hazama approached Tsubaki and convinced her to continue attacking Noelle. Tsubaki complied and continued to overwhelm Noelle. Just before Tsubaki's final attack, Ragna arrived and blocked it, protecting Noelle. He declared that he was fed up with them and challenged them to fight him together. Tsubaki, overwhelmed by emotions, attacked Ragna, but he easily parried the attack. At the same time, Relius descended and strangled Noelle, causing her to fall to her knees as he declared her to be nothing more than a failed creation. Moments later, the black space disappeared as Tsubaki fled the area. Soon after, Noelle, freed from Relius' stranglehold, decided to chase after her. Suddenly, Rachel approached Ragna and admitted that her goal was to bring him to witness the fight because she knew that Noelle's face was very similar to that of his younger sister. Before she left, Rachel revealed that she was curious about how Ragna would react once he discovered that Noelle was an artificial human. Meanwhile, Noelle, who was chasing after Tsubaki, noticed that her eyes had changed and explained that this was a side effect of using dark space creation magic to defeat Jean. Despite this, Noelle tried to convince Tsubaki to come with her, but Tsubaki refused and chose to leave her. On the other hand, Hazama, who was walking down a ditch in Kagetsuchi, was suddenly attacked by Arakune, who was attracted by Azume's scent on his body. Fortunately, Hazama was able to easily hold Arakune's body against the gutter ceiling using his Ouroboros power, and quickly fled the scene. In the Sector 7 laboratory, Kokonoi was seen analyzing Lambda's unstable status. However, she accidentally spilled coffee on her clothes and carelessly threw the soiled garments aside. Suddenly, one of them hit a button and activated Lambda. Outside the base, Lambda appeared near Arakune, causing him to attack Lambda. Ragna, who was not far from the area, rushed to help Lambda and defeated Arakune, sending him back to the ditch. When Kokonoi realized that Lambda had left the base, she checked the CCTV cameras in Kagutsuchi City but was unable to find him. She then contacted Tager to help locate him. On the other hand, Makoto tried to comfort Noel, who was still upset after the incident with Tsubaki. She then suggested that they ask Kokonoi for help and warn Noel that Hazama cannot be trusted. Makoto reassured Noel that she would investigate the incident further. After being saved by Ragna, Lambda accompanied him to a meadow not far from where she had appeared. There, she realized that she was attracted to the leech that had been part of Arakune before. The leech was injured, so Ragna suggested that they search for an aqua leaf, which could be used as medicine. As they sat in the meadow, Tager suddenly appeared, intent on capturing Lambda. After Hazama left the room, Mikado seemed to remember something from his past, and he began to weep. His tears fell onto the hand of the protagonist, who had been watching him from the shadows. The protagonists then stepped forward and introduced themselves as the person who had been entrusted with the role of destroying Hazama's plan. Mikado, who was surprised by the presence of the protagonist, asked for their identity and purpose. The protagonist explained that they were a member of the organization that had been tasked with stopping Hazama, and that they had been sent to gather information about his plan. Mikado, who had been isolated for a long time, was grateful to the protagonists for coming to see him and asked for their help in stopping Hazama's plan. The protagonists, who had made up their mind, agreed to help Mikado and promised to do everything in their power to stop Hazama. As Noel and Makoto investigate the mysterious Hazama, they reach out to their ally, Kokonoi, for assistance. She asks them to hold tight as she dispatches Tager to join them. The trio rendezvous on the roof of the building, ready to delve deeper into the investigation and uncover the truth behind Hazama's actions. As Jin and Tsubaki cross paths, she is determined to fulfill her duty to eliminate him. The two engage in a fierce battle, with Jin relying on his sword and ice magic to overpower Tsubaki. After emerging victorious, Jin sets his sights on Ragna. Meanwhile, Noel and Makoto are startled to find Tager severely injured on the roof of the building after facing off with Hazama. They know they must act quickly in order to get to the bottom of the mystery surrounding Hazama and his motives. As Tsubaki recovers from her defeat at the hands of Jin, she is approached by Mikado. Meanwhile, Jin finally comes face to face with Ragna for their long-awaited battle. This time, Jin's strength has grown to the point where he is able to go toe-to-toe with Ragna. He even manages to pin Ragna against the wall with his relentless assault. When Ragna launches an attack, Jin erects an ice wall to block it and counters with a surprise attack that catches Ragna off guard. The battle becomes a flurry of fast-paced exchanges, with Jin applying pressure on Ragna with his quick strikes. At their location, Makoto urges Noel to leave and turn Hazama over to her. However, before they can take any action, Hazama attacks Makoto and sends her flying. In response, Noel draws a gun and tries to shoot Hazama, but he easily dodges the attack. Noel rushes to help Makoto, but she once again urges him to leave. Despite her insistence, Noel refuses to abandon her and suggests that they join forces against Hazama. As Tager comes to, he tries to contact Kokonoi for assistance. She advises him not to move and reveals that she is charging a large amount of power into Lambda's body in preparation for a fight against Hazama. Noel and Makoto team up once again to take on Hazama, with Noel attacking from a distance while Makoto strikes at close range. Their coordinated attack manages to land a hit on Hazama, causing him to become annoyed. In a fit of rage, he unleashes his Ouroboros power and hurls Makoto's body against the wall. He then uses the same power to push and knock Noel unconscious. Hazama approaches Makoto and subjects her to torture. When Noel comes to, she sees Makoto helpless and being thrown off the top of the building by Hazama. Enraged, Noel confronts Hazama, who blames her for the situation. As Noel sinks deeper into grief, a giant cocoon appears and traps her inside. As Hazama revels in the success of his plan, Ragna continues to struggle against Jin, finding himself increasingly cornered. Sensing that something is amiss, Ragna unleashes a powerful attack that momentarily distracts Jin and allows him to make an escape. Jin gives chase, but is suddenly confronted by Jubei, who arrives on the scene using the power of a tornado. Jubei reminds Jin of the dangers of his desire to kill Ragna and urges him to stop. Ragna makes his way to the roof of the building, where he is shocked to find Noel trapped inside a cocoon behind Hazama. Enraged that Hazama would do this to Noel, Ragna attacks him and demands that he stop his evil plan. However, Hazama refuses to back down and activates his own magical powers in preparation for a fight. In response, Ragna unleashes the power of the Azure Grimoire. The two engage in a heated battle, each determined to come out on top. In another dimension, Rachel encounters Hakumen, who is being sealed by a magical power. She informs him that Hazama has managed to coerce Noel into halting the Azure cycle. However, Hakumen realizes that Rachel wants to repeat the cycle despite the objections of the masters. She seeks his help in making this happen, which is why she released him from his binding. After freeing Hakumen, Rachel takes him to a building where Noelle is being held. However, upon being freed, Hakumen suddenly leaves her, and she is unable to stop him. Shortly after, Rachel finds herself trapped in a magic circle created by Mikado, which slowly begins to drown her. As the battle between Ragna and Hazama rages on the roof of the building, Ragna finds it difficult to activate his Azure Grimoire due to Hazama's superior power. Suddenly, Ragna hears a heartbeat coming from the cocoon that holds Noelle and becomes suspicious that Hazama plans to revive the Black Beast. However, Hazama denies this and reveals that after humans discovered the border of the human world known as the Cauldron, they created a god system called the Takamagahara system, which he despises. Hazama explains to Ragna that the Azure power within their bodies is artificial, while the Azure power within Noelle's body is natural. He believes that Noelle can become the ultimate weapon to destroy the god system. As Hazama speaks, Noelle emerges from the cocoon with newfound powers and a hatred for the world. When Ragna tries to attack her, his actions are thwarted by Hazama, who uses his Ouroboros power to injure him. As Noelle confronts Hazama, he orders her to go to the cauldron and carry out a massacre. Without hesitation, Noelle follows his orders and sets off for the cauldron using her magic circle. Meanwhile, with Taeger's assistance, Kokonoi manages to transport Lambda, who has been imbued with new powers, to the battlefield. From the control room in her lab, Kokonoi commands Lambda to attack Hazama when he is off guard. As Noelle arrives at the cauldron, she comes face to face with Hakumen, who is ready to stop her. The two engage in a fierce battle. Meanwhile, Hazama continues to attack Ragna, who is struggling to unleash his full power. Despite being at a disadvantage, Ragna persists in trying to attack Hazama, even though his attacks seem to easily be dodged. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, Lambda intervenes, sacrificing her body to intercept an Ouroboros attack and protect Ragna. However, this ultimately leads to her demise. As Lambda's body turns into flakes of light and is absorbed into Ragna's body, he is infused with her new powers. Armed with this added strength, Ragna launches a fierce attack on Hazama, battering him until he is left helpless. At the cauldron, the battle between Noelle and Hakumen reaches a stalemate. Soon after, Jean arrives to lend Hakumen a hand in fighting Noelle, who is incredibly strong. Meanwhile, Ragna, having successfully rescued Rachel from the magic circle, joins Jean and Hakumen as they struggle to fend off Noelle's overwhelming power. As they arrive at the cauldron, Ragna and Jean team up to defeat Noelle, though they are clearly struggling against her giant sword. Despite being battered and exhausted, Ragna refuses to give up and continues to try and reach Noelle in an attempt to revive her. As Lambda's spirit appears, Ragna uses her artificial human mind to restore Noelle's memories while fending off her sword. Finally, Noelle awakens. Meanwhile, Hazama has achieved his true form and heads to the Takamagahara system, where he destroys everyone behind the system using the Phantom Virus. With the destruction of the Takamagahara system, Hazama establishes a new system for the human world. Meanwhile, Noelle, who has just awoken from her faint, is greeted by Ragna, who sacrificed his left arm in order to revive her. Finally, those at the cauldron are relieved that the crisis has been resolved and are filled with joy. However, just as they thought the crisis was over, Hazama appears through a magic circle and announces that he has succeeded in destroying the Takamagahara system and replacing it with a new one, with Mikado as the new emperor to lead it. This news comes as a surprise to everyone, particularly Ragna and Jean, who had believed that Saya was the emperor. In the end, Ragna and the others are unable to stop Hazama and his group as they leave the cauldron to begin their grand plan after successfully resetting the human life system. One of the moral messages that can be taken away from this anime is the importance of resilience and the ability to adapt to change. Life can be unpredictable, and things may not always go as smoothly as we would like. In these situations, it's important to be able to accept failure and use it as a learning opportunity. Instead of getting discouraged, we should persevere and keep trying until we achieve our goals.